one of our friends is Greg Wynn, who is a U.S. Marine, and he's a collector. He lives mostly in New York at the moment. He's actually in the Middle East, but he has collected over the course of his life one of the largest collections of sheet music, Roosevelt-related sheet music in the world. And Sharon and I were there not so long ago, and we said, what if the Roosevelt Center could digitize all of that sheet music so that what his wonderful collection wouldn't have to leave his hands, but digital copies of it could be put on our site. And then we thought, well, as long as we're doing that, what would it be like to actually hear those pieces? And so we asked Beverly Everett, and she was willing to do this. And our goal is to take all of that sheet music and more as we collect it, and not only to have it on our site with its cover and all of the inside material in the back, plus interpretive material, but also then for you to be able to click on that link, and it will then, you'll hear the actual piece of sheet music that was created about Roosevelt or during Roosevelt's lifetime. And we haven't done all of it yet, but we've done a pilot project. So Sharon, talk a little bit about how that came about.
Yes, when Dr. Everett indicated she was willing to do this with us, we went to the North Dakota Council on the Arts and sought a grant from them, and we were successful. And so Dr. Everett selected 14 pieces of music of the 140 in Greg Wynn's collection. And she put together the musicians. So she's really done the work, the hard work, coordinating the musicians, getting them into studio and recording. And so we want to share with you a little bit of that music.
Most of these songs are written for piano or for piano and voice. And so to add some little extra interest to it, we wrote out some obligato parts for violin and flute and oboe, and sometimes had everyone playing, and sometimes just had a few playing or playing in duet, or just me playing piano. Beth Hurt, who's on staff here at Dickinson State, was our vocalist for the first ones that we recorded. And it's just an exciting project. I mean, I spoke to some students this morning that I don't know of any other president who has this much music written about him. And the context of these songs is very interesting. Many different subjects, many about the Rough Riders, a number of them about Roosevelt's safari to Africa. There's the famous Alice Blue Waltz, some of them about his children, some of them commemorative after his death. And so I'm just honored to be part of this, but I'm also learning so much about that music of the time when this sheet music was coming to the fore, and that, you know, this is how people communicated their thoughts. And I know what it takes to write a piece of music and to take the time to sit down and compose this and put words to it and actually have it published with some of these beautiful covers. I hope we can show you a few of the covers. Is really quite fascinating.
But you've done 14.
We've done 14. We are hoping to do them all. It's an expensive project because the musicians are very generous with their time, but to get everything mastered and to get everything recorded. And so certainly if it's something that interests anyone, or you know of anyone with a particular interest, you know, please let me know. And I'm also looking for other musicians to be part of that, and we welcome that. We'd love to have, you know, have other instruments represented, other vocalists and backgrounds represented in our project.
So just to say a little bit about our mission is to have every piece of Roosevelt audio where he's speaking that exists in the world, and we've got that so far as we know. We want every film where he makes an appearance for 3 seconds or 30 minutes. We want all of the Roosevelt-related film. We want every Roosevelt document, every letter that he wrote, every letter that he received. We want every Roosevelt cartoon, every photograph ever taken of Roosevelt or those close to him, diaries, newspaper clippings, ephemera. And so our goal is to have the most comprehensive Roosevelt archive in the world. And one of the areas is this sheet music, and Greg Wynn has been extraordinarily generous in letting us have digital copies of all this. Sagamore Hill actually did the scanning for us. But this isn't all of it, is it, Sharon? And so we're still collecting this archive.
We have all of Greg's.
All of Greg's, but there's more in the world. And so we'll keep collecting. And so we've only got 14 recorded at the moment, but in the end we want you to be able to know that when you come to our site, every known piece of Roosevelt sheet music is there. with interpretation, and they're all performed there too. So show us a little, Sharon, of what this looks like on the site. Let me hand you this.
So I just did a quick search on the website for We Stand at Armageddon, and you could see how simple this is to get to the music. The first one is the sheet music itself. We'll take a look at that so you can see these beautiful covers that Beverly was talking about. Really, this was the heyday of sheet music, I think. And so the artwork is very ornate. In your program books, for those who have them, on page 7, we have a part of Greg's essay about his collection, and some of the covers shown there as well. But this will just give you a sense of this particular piece, and we'll zoom in. You can see the level of detail that you're able to see on these pieces. So again, the Roosevelt Battle Hymn. And something that we just accomplished on the website this last week, I was sharing with Beverly. Now, when you go to the website and you do this search, not only do both pieces come up in a search, but as you can see, we're looking at the sheet music. And if you look to the right, you see that little audio icon? And the music is right there. That was not the case until about 3 days ago. We just got that done with our web designers. And so you can flip very easily from viewing the sheet music to listening to the piece. You can see it loading, and we'll just listen to a little bit of what we should have sounded like.
We stand at Armageddon with our naked swords in hand to fight the hosts of Mammon seeking to possess our land. With sturdy arms and loyal hearts we'll strike for home and right, and with the blessing of the Lord we'll win a glorious fight. We stand for home and motherland and for our Teddy too. We've chosen him to lead us, for we know he's tried and true. We're fighting for the people's right, led by brave Theodore, and just because we know he's true, we want him to lead once more.
Isn't that great? Isn't that a great recording?
And so imagine what this will mean when every piece of known Roosevelt music is there and it has interpretation. Who created it? Under what circumstances? When was it first performed? How popular was it? Were the illustrations taken from somebody who was doing journeyman work, or were they famous illustrations of some sort? What became of this? Was this folded into later popular music? Was it based on earlier popular music? All of that will be available for the first time ever, really. And Greg Wynn has written a little introductory essay, but he'll be doing much more work for us in that way. Show us a few more covers if you can. How about Red Bandana?
Okay. I'm going to show you the easiest search to do to get to these files, and I'm just searching for the word audio. Clay mentioned we do have 8 audio files of Roosevelt's own voice. I know of one other, Clay, that we need to, track down and get the access to put on in the digital archive. But so these at the top are the speeches by Roosevelt. Once you get past those, you get into the music, the Bull Moose March, Song of the Western Hunter. And in each case, it'll tell you whether it's a recording or sheet music. You can see right away which you're getting. But again, as soon as you jump to any of these, the sheet music or recording.
Show the one on top, North Dakota Teddy Roosevelt's West.
Okay. We performed this 2 years ago. There are actually 2 copies of this North Dakota Teddy Roosevelt's West. And
there it is.
The image on the first is this bucking bronco. I'm not sure whether we have the second in the digital archive yet. The second has an oil well. Because it was re-released in the 1950s when North Dakota's first oil well was.
And Greg actually gave us the physical copy of that, yes, which we have, but it's the same song, but with the 1950s oil boom iconography on it.
So this is our Teddy Roosevelt's West in its original form.
With the Maltese cross. So can we hear it?
This one has not been recorded. Am I
Not
right?
recorded yet?
Oh, it has. Okay, let me back up then.
I thought I saw the icon over here.
Okay, perfect. Oh, yes, this was in the first set.
We sing of North Dakota, bright star in a field of blue, of health and wealth her quota is about to skip to you. She is moving, moving onward on the trail our fathers trod, and with her hand set to the plow she holds her faith in God. With hidden treasure, wealth untold, North Dakota welcomes you to her prairies broad, with their fertile sod kissed by sun and rain and dew. She leads the way in the USA. We call her God's country. Teddy Roosevelt's west, he loved her best. North Dakota, hail to thee.
No. Immortalized North Dakota.
Yes,
And so let's do one more. Can you find the red bandana? Is that on this?
Beverly?
You didn't record it?
We did it for the Chautauqua. I don't
We did it
think
for the
was in
Chautauqua, but
set
not
that was
yet for this.
recorded.
So what's another one that we should listen to? Alice Blue?
So Alice was almost as much of a celebrity as her father, and there were a number of pieces of music about Alice as well as Theodore, and this is one of the
Let's
selections.
see, can we see the cover?
You can read the ribbon here. It says, Alice, dedicated to Alice, daughter of our President Theodore Roosevelt. And in the bells, it says, Alice, dear Alice, we wish you all happiness.
You can probably stop. So that's this project, which is at what? We probably need another $50,000 or certainly $25,000 to complete that project, but that is going to be a marvelous feature. Can you go to one of his audio pieces just for a moment? So there are only a handful of known pieces of Roosevelt's audio, and it's not clear that they are, if they may need to be remastered to bring his pitch down a little, but let's listen to one.
Political parties exist to secure responsible government and to execute the will of the people. From these great tasks, both of the old parties have turned aside. Instead instead of instruments to promote the general welfare, they have become the tools of corrupt interests which use them impartially to serve their selfish purposes. Behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. To destroy this invisible government, to dissolve the unholy alliance between corrupt business and corrupt politics, is the first task of the statesmanship of the day.
So this one could use a transcript too, because it's a, and maybe we should have a modern voice repeating it, but we want to make the most of those. And then just to show us how the website works, Sharon, so over here, it's suggesting related materials. So what do we have here?
We have letters and a telegram. These are generated, if we go back up to the top of the website, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit to allow you to see these. They're quite small unless you're looking on your own home screen. These subjects, progressivism, political parties, business and politics, every item in the digital library and every blog that we put on the website, every encyclopedia article is cataloged with those same subjects. And so that's what allows this to dynamically generate related materials. And so when you see those related items at the right, these all contain those same subjects at some level. And so let's just look quickly at this letter from George Perkins to Theodore Roosevelt. Progressivism is among the subjects of that letter as well. And as soon as that one comes up, you have additional ones that are related. So our hope is that people get in here and 2 hours later forget what they were looking for because it's just so engaging that you just keep moving on to related
materials. One thing takes you to the next,
yes.
and it's these subject headings.
Yes.
That's where the metadata comes in. Once we get a digital image, let's say that this letter, if you could pull it up, page 1 of this letter from Perkins. So we get this, it's digitized, this is from the Library of Congress collection. It's a typescript, so it's relatively easy to read. Once we get it, it's image number XXXX256B or whatever. It's an arbitrary number. It means nothing. It's not searchable. It has no value yet. But explain now what happens with Grant and processing these documents.
Sure. Our full-time cataloger, Grant Carlson, who doubles as a transportation manager, has been shuttling us around the campus the last couple of days. Grant catalogs basically full-time with the documents, and so he is going in and creating the creator, recipient, date, title, a brief description that you see in the metadata, and then these subjects that we talked about that allow this interactivity between the documents. And so we go page by page through these materials, read them, and describe them to make them searchable so that this magic happens on the website for you.
So he characterizes this with subject keywords that allow us to search and to associate it with others. And I was mentioning, I don't think you were in the room, the volunteers program. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Is Linda with us right now? Linda, or any of our other volunteers? Melanie is here. So all of the work that we do is in a web-based system, and so it can be done from anywhere in the world, literally. And so Linda Hott is a local volunteer with us who helps to catalog the documents, and Melanie Vitito from the San Diego area, Carlsbad, California, also participates. She works on a little different level. Melanie found she didn't enjoy as much working with the detail of all the metadata fields, but she is actually transcribing some of the handwritten documents that are particularly difficult to read, which is another very important work that we need done. So we're just very grateful, and if others are interested in volunteering and helping us with this process, we do all our training online. You don't have to come here to Dickinson to get trained and get started, and then we assist you to continue through the process and contribute to this amazing archive.
So Sharon, let's say that I'm living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I'm interested in Roosevelt and the progressive movement. So I come to our site and tell me what I can do. In addition to doing what you've just done, I can create an account for myself, and I can put things in baskets, can I not?
Yes. On the website, this is a feature we haven't explored too much yet. We've designed it, and it is accessible, and actually more people are using it than I had realized. We looked at the number of accounts recently, and it's quite good, actually. So this area called My Collections, when a person signs into that area, let's see if I can remember my account information. know when everybody's watching you, you make all kinds of typos, right? So I have just logged into my account. Now this My Collections area has changed, and these are my groups of documents that I have saved. So I've titled each of these kind of baskets. And I have one for Cuba, 1898. When the Theodore Roosevelt Association was taking a trip to Cuba, I gathered together this set of documents, and they sent them out to the participants who were traveling so they could read some of the letters that TR wrote from Cuba, his diary entries during that period, letters from his family members. And so you gather them together, and then you can make your own notes. The notes column here is things that I've written to describe what that is. Now, this particular collection I made public so that the TRA members could get to it, but I also have several of my collections that are private. So, for instance, a scholar working on a new book isn't going to want to reveal to the world all of their research and all their notes, but they could create their own collections for each chapter of the book and make their own research notes of what's significant in each document or what quote they want to pull or that type of thing. So it's a very useful tool.
So let's say you're going through and you find a document that's about where Roosevelt is writing a letter, and he says that he can't believe the number of sheet music creations that have come about since he became president, and you now want to share that with Greg Wynn. How do you do it?
How do you save to the collections?
And then export it to Greg.
Okay. Getting to my collection isn't as easy as it's going to be. We're still working on that feature. But to save a document, I'm just going to jump to Quentin here. And let's say I want to save this letter from Quentin to Mary Lucas. So I would simply add it to a collection, decide which one I want it to be in, if it's private or public. I'll put this in my general collection. At the moment, that's a private collection. Oops.
You created a new collection.
Yes, I did. Let me try that again. Add to collection. I haven't done this for a while, actually, Clay. Put me on the spot. So I could describe here.
Quentin writes letter.
Quentin writes about Ted and Kermit. Okay. I have no idea if that's what he's talking about in this letter, but we'll. So now I'm done making that notation and placing it in the collection. And that's as easy as it is. Again, it's the discoverability we're still working on, so I'm not as able to demonstrate.
How do you export it now to somebody? Email it or Facebook or whatever?
That's what I am saying. I can't demonstrate that right now.
But you can do it, though.
Yes, it can be done. It's not as simple as
so let's say I'm doing work for you, and I happen to be in New York City, and I could then collect things in a basket, and I can feed them to you, or if I want to put them on social networking, I can do that. There's a way to export.
Yes.
But yet to protect those parts that you want to keep private to your own scholarship.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about the sheet music and talked a little bit about how to search the collection. How about the film project?
Okay, the film is the newest materials to come in. We received a shipment of samples, again, about 10 days ago. So this is just under the wire to have it ready to share with you.
But before you do, let's just talk a little bit about that. So we went to Culpeper, which is an arm of the Library of Congress where they have their National Film Archive. And it was actually a Cold War facility, and it's been turned into this incredible film archive where they can store things that are filled with nitrate so that they don't have nitrate deterioration or explosions. And so we went there to see it, and there are, I don't know quite how many Roosevelt-related films, but there are a lot of them.
Almost 300. I double-checked the list today.
And thanks to the work of Byron Dorgan, Senator Dorgan, we have this ongoing small appropriation at the Library of Congress we've had, and we were able to get a digital project to digitize every piece of the Roosevelt film collection at the Library of Congress so that then we will be able to have it. Some of these are digitized for the first time thanks to this project, and then these will all be available there, of course, at the Library of Congress, but also at our site. And we took delivery of the first big batch.
Right. Mike showed you a little while ago the Library of Congress Theodore Roosevelt in Film exhibit, and that has a subset of the 300. But they didn't have any intention until we came along to do the rest of the 300. And so we're helping them to get something done that they would have liked to do and just needed the resources to do. So all 300 will be digitized in high definition and made available, as Clay said, both on our website and ultimately the Library of Congress will publish it on theirs as well.
So could we just show this clip of Theodore Roosevelt in Africa?
Looks like it's working.
The screen can be made full screen, can it not?
Actually, it cannot.
Not yet?
We're oh, it can.
It can.
Magically. I couldn't do that on my computer 2 days ago. Another
It's all
new
being developed
innovation.
as we sit here.
You guys use that healthcare website?
And here it comes, Africa.
We found, again, this is a small sample set that they sent us. The duration of this particular clip on our site now is, I don't know, 7 minutes. The duration on the Library of Congress site is 10 or 12. So something has happened in the speed of the clip they've sent us, and we're going to need to get that corrected. So I don't think that Ferris wheel was going quite that fast. Nor this train. If you put the two side by side, clearly the Library of Congress.
Remember, TR had a
runs
chair attached to the front of the train, and he sat in that chair as they went through Africa on his way to some of these safaris.
It's called the cow catcher.
On the
am I
front of the
right?
cow catcher, yeah.
Yes. Again, the context and the detail that's available in these, as Mike was saying earlier, the context in the films, apart from TR, he might make a slight appearance in this one, but there's a lot of other material in here that's very interesting and useful.
So I think you can stop that for the moment, but again, just think of what this means. Up till now, if you had wanted to see these films, we probably wouldn't know they exist. If you go to the Library of Congress, where you fly at enormous expense and get a reader's card, and you look through the catalog and you say, oh, I'm very interested in Theodore Roosevelt in Africa in 1909, they'd say, well, great, but it's in the vaults and it's never been digitized. There's nothing we can do. We can probably maybe arrange for you to see it, but we'll have to decide first whether it's fragile or it can be seen. So you might wait an hour, a day, a month, or never see that film, and you'd be at the Library of Congress, where your hotel would be costing $250 a night, etc. Now all of these films, all of the known Roosevelt films, will be at the Library of Congress website, so any American can see them. But if you're interested in Roosevelt, our lens will take you to all of those too, and we will interpret them here at Dickinson State University. So this is not just a wonderful set of bells and whistles. This is kind of an intellectual revolution, that people are going to create new scholarship based on being able to see a film like this for the first time, or new scholarship able to see the body language between Taft and Roosevelt at a public event. This really creates a different sort of way of seeing Roosevelt, and it's a multimedia way. You know, if you publish a book on Roosevelt in Africa, the publisher is going to say, well, Sharon, you can have 15 photographs. That's it. And then you choose carefully what they are, and you want 30 or 70 or 200 photographs. Well, that wouldn't be possible in print media, but in the internet world, you can have all of this. And so this is really going to change the way people see and change the way people think about history, and it's going to knit the cartoon to the film clip, to the editorial, to the diary entry, to the letter, etc. And so I'm sure you get the sense of how excited we are about this, but this isn't even the 3 million we want. This is just continuing the operations of the Roosevelt Center, that every year we're bringing in more and more and more pieces of this. Mm-hmm. So this is so exciting. And tell them a little bit about the sort of buzz that the site is getting from scholars and and others.
Sure. I was just at the Western History Association conference, and this is a really fun story to digress a little bit. I had arranged to go down a couple days early and visit the former president of DSU, who was responsible for founding the Theodore Roosevelt Center at some level, encouraging its growth and development in the early years. And so I'm on the plane, and I'm flying into Phoenix, not Tucson, where the conference is, because I'm visiting Lee and Deanna Vickers. And just across from me, in one row up, is Jeremy Johnston from the Buffalo Bill Cody papers. He's the director of the Papers Project for Buffalo Bill Cody. I said, "Oh, Jeremy, you're heading down early as well and going into Phoenix instead of Tucson?" He said, "Yes, I am, and I'm driving down with a colleague tomorrow morning who's flying in tomorrow." I said, "Oh, could I just catch a ride?" So set that all up. I'm in the car the next day, and his colleague is talking about the sessions he's responsible for at the conference, one of which is called the 6-shooter. 6 slides, 6 minutes, to present your new digital project in the humanities. And I said, "Oh, I was wanting to get involved with that, but I couldn't figure out where the contact information was." He said, "Well, I'm in charge, and I just had a cancellation." And so I was able to present in the 6-shooter session the work of the Theodore Roosevelt Center. And before we started this session, I was making conversation with participants as they came in, and a young scholar, historian, said, "Oh, yeah, I used your digital library in my book that was published in May." We didn't even know about that one yet, and it's the first work in which we're in the citations of the book. We have been mentioned in bibliographies by Lou Gould, Doug Brinkley, I don't remember, there's at least one other.
And in acknowledgments.
Yes, acknowledgments and descriptions of sources to find Roosevelt materials. But this is the first time we've been cited officially. And so, we're pretty delighted about that.
We've become a footnote. We have our first footnote.
Yes.
And we're thrilled.
And many more to come, as these scholars are telling us. All over the world, they're using our materials. Another fun story, Mike Cullinan was engaged to speak here, and I attended the TRA meeting in Buffalo about 6 weeks ago, the Theodore Roosevelt Association meeting. The speaker about Roosevelt's immigration policy used the film that Mike mentioned earlier, My Girl Tisa, and he did a fabulous job with his talk. And so I came home and I wrote to Mike and I said, "Do you know this film, My Girl Tisa?" He said, "Yeah, I helped Hans find that on eBay." The best part of that story is Hans is from the Netherlands. Mike's in the UK, and we're here in Dickinson, North Dakota, and we're interacting over Roosevelt materials and helping each other in networking. And so it's just an exciting moment for us that we're beginning to be recognized in the Roosevelt world as a valuable service to scholars and others.
So I'm going to pull out to do that little piece from the film, and then we'll bring Heather up. Does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay, so I've got to figure out how to do this.
Okay, it's just the media player.
Okay, you show me.
Yep, right here.
Oh, that's Beverly.
That's Beverly's. Okay, let's close the media player.
I think we have to yeah, that's what I was about to do. Here we go. All right, so.
Should start automatically.
So in Michael's talk, you saw a little clip from the film Through the Roosevelt Country with Roosevelt's Friends. It was made in 1919 by Herman Hagedorn. Herman Hagedorn was one of the first biographers of Roosevelt, and he wrote a really important book called Roosevelt in the Badlands. And he had arranged with former President Roosevelt to come out here in 1919 on a kind of a Roosevelt roundup where Roosevelt's old friends would all be gathered in Medora, and this would allow Hagedorn to interview them. And Roosevelt at one time was even thinking of joining this, but Roosevelt died on the 6th of January 1919, so Hagedorn came anyway with letters of recommendation from Theodore Roosevelt to James Foley and Joe and Sylvain Ferris and so on. So anyway, that film, it's about a 30-minute film that has been known about, but we really were thrilled when we saw it because of its high quality and because of the way that it archives these critical friendships and associations that Roosevelt had while he was here between 1883 and 1887. And so then we made a documentary about that documentary. We don't have time to show it all, but I wanted just to show you a little bit about the film, about how what we did was we and this is really, Heather helped us and her predecessor Wallace, but Herman Hagedorn, in addition to writing this book and leaving notes that are in the Harvard collection, and they're extraordinary transcripts of the interviews that he did while he was here, but he also took still photographs, and we did not know that at the beginning, but when we discovered several hundred still photographs taken by Herman Hagedorn here, we looked at all of them and discovered that one of them was of the camera. You know, he brought a film crew out, a Pathé film crew out to do this documentary, which was a bold and even a kind of crazy thing to do in 1919. And so we saw a picture of this camera. So I showed it to a friend of mine at Makoche Studios, and he said, I'll bet I can find what camera that was. And so he began searching around, and then we discovered that there's a guy on the West Coast who has an identical Bell and Howell camera to the one that was used in the making of this film. So we hired him to come to North Dakota, and then we set him up on exactly the same places in the Badlands where the original camera had been set, and he took new film of the same scenes with the same camera, but 1919 to 2011. And then we had video cameras videoing him with his Bell and Howell, replicating Roosevelt's, et cetera, et cetera. And so we don't have time to show all this, but I want to just show two quick segments of this if we can. I hope the sound works. One of the still photographs that Hagedorn took during his time in the Badlands was of the movie camera that was used to make his documentary film. That camera was a Bell & Howell 2709, which was regarded as the best and most reliable movie camera of its time. Retired Hollywood director of photography Sam Dodge lives in Washington State. He owns a working Bell & Howell 2709, serial number 100, the first camera, in fact, owned by MGM. He agreed to visit the Badlands of North Dakota to take footage in precisely the same locations that Hagedorn had used back in 1919. Among other things, Sam's journey to North Dakota in 2011 proved just how innovative, bold, and frankly complicated it had been for Hagedorn to bring a film crew to the Badlands in the earliest days of motion pictures.
All right, gentlemen. Only thing holding us back is fear. 25. Okay. 30. I don't like that. Tighten it up. And then I'll figure out what that issue is.
Look at that shadow on the...
Sam informed us that only 3 people were left in the world who know how to keep these old cameras in good repair. I'm easily the best of them, he told us. The other 2 are dead.
The Bell & Howell 2709s were the steadiest camera ever made. Roll camera! The pilot pins that actually sit fixed, this part of the movement pushes the film onto the pilot pins. The pilot pins are fixed, so they don't move. That's what makes this camera steady, is that the film is shoved onto the pins, and then it's pulled off of the pins, pulled down one frame, and shoved back onto the pins again. Got 4 lenses. Lenses are on a turret. You unlock the turret, rotate it, they lock into place. And this is the cameraman's eyepiece. And you rotate it over to the side so you can see what's going on through the lens. The image in here is reversed, right to left, and upside down.
Oh, that's great. Roll camera. Action.
This is the Joe Ferris store. It was one of the community centers during Theodore.
Hold on, I got to cut. This gauge here is the footage counter. It has 2. One footage counter here and then one in the back. It's redundant because you really, really want to know how much film you have before you start to shoot.
Or you'll run out of film.
Yeah.
Finally, after 2 days of wandering about the Badlands shooting film with Sam Dodge, I got my opportunity to do a big stand-up monologue in front of the Maltese Cross cabin.
All right, here we go.
This is the Maltese Cross Cabin.
Out of film?
Roll up.
That's it?
Did.
So they ran out of film. Anyway, it was just such a thrill to do this. But the reason we bring it up is, if you're interested in that documentary, we'd be happy to let you see it. But we're not just collecting all this material; we're interpreting it. And so we did all that legwork on this one film because, of course, it's the most important film related to Roosevelt in the Badlands in the collection. But we've then done the work on how the film was made, who made it, under what circumstances, how it was released. We found out that that a group of sort of Rough Riders, or kind of a Buffalo Bill knockoff group from the Badlands, were called in to perform for the film. We found out that one of the fancy riders, you didn't see those scenes, but one of the fancy riders, they're doing figure eights and all sorts of stuff. One of them died of a heart attack during the filming of this thing. And so all that's interpretation value added to these raw documents that we're possessing. So with that, let's maybe bring Heather Cole up to talk a little bit about our relationship with Harvard.
Yes, Heather, if you would join us on stage for a couple minutes. So some of you know and have had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Heather Cole. She is the curator of the Theodore Roosevelt collection at Harvard. That's just her sideline job, though. Her real job is assistant curator of modern manuscripts. So you might have seen in the press recently the announcement of the release of documents into the Emily Dickinson archive. Heather was very occupied with that project and all the media coverage and interest in the new access that there is to the Emily Dickinson works. So that was her full-time job before she was asked to also take on the curation of the Theodore Roosevelt collection at Harvard. And it's just been a great partnership for us to get to work with Heather. She actually, when did you start at Harvard, Heather?
6 years ago.
And then when did you take on the Theodore Roosevelt curation?
Last July.
Okay. So since last July, Heather has been working with us. So she wasn't involved in the original digitization of Harvard materials, and she's not that versed in kind of how that all came about. The first project we did with Harvard was to digitize everything in TR's own hand. And Heather's predecessor, Wallace Daly, was very instrumental and helpful to us in identifying the materials and getting that process going.
So when we go to an institution like Harvard, first of all, we say, would you be interested in working with us to do this? And they almost all say yes. And Harvard said yes so quickly that we were thrilled and frankly a little bit surprised. So then they've agreed in principle. Then there are many issues to settle. One is the queue, the priority. And of course, they say, what do you want? We say, we want everything. We want everything that's related to Theodore Roosevelt that you have. And they say, well, that we'll need to do an inventory, but that turns out to be more than we can possibly afford. And so then we have to choose what we want first and what's the higher priority, how we want to queue things down the line, what we will do if we run out of money, what we will do if we get unlimited amounts of money. There are also things that are embargoed for different reasons that we might not have access to. And so this is a long series of very happy negotiations, but we decided that the letters, things written in the handwriting of Theodore Roosevelt, were the highest value and in a certain way the easiest thing to complete, and so we started that way.
Yes, and so we have everything written by Roosevelt that physically exists at Harvard on the website. That is all processed and published and available right now. The project we're working on at the moment is the dictabelts of Carlton Putnam, one of TR's biographers. These belts are like taffy, but they're getting less and less taffy-like as they dry out over time. And had we not come along, they might have stayed in storage until they were not recoverable.
In fact, when I went there for the first time, this would be 7 or 8 years ago, for this project, Wallace Daly was bringing out, he was Heather's predecessor in this role, and he was bringing out cartons of things to take a look at. And one of the cartons was the Putnam papers. Putnam wrote in 1958 this extraordinary first volume of what might have been a 3-volume master biographical study of Roosevelt, and then he quit after the first volume. But in it we found, and Wallace knew about these of course, but we found these dictaphone belts. And if you remember dictaphone, it was like taffy. It's like a red taffy, and it could be a foot long or 3 feet long or 6 feet long. It was cut at the end of the recording session, and so they are then looped like taffy in a kind of a figure-8 sine curve, and they're stored in tissue paper. And as they get older, this was a very high-tech recording technology in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. As they get older, they become brittle and they crack. And so I said at that time to Wallace, if we can find the money, would you be willing to let us digitize those dictaphone belts? And he said, certainly. It has to happen right here at Harvard. You can't just take them, with you somewhere. And then he said, but it's not clear that we can find the equipment. If we find the equipment, it's not clear what's on them. It's not clear that they're audible. And so, but we persevered, and it took a long time. And now we have gotten the first batch. I have them. We have them. And they are interviews that he did here, mostly, to prepare that biography. And they're with people who weren't Roosevelt's contemporaries, but children and grandchildren and so on. And we have possession of them, and we're remastering them, and then we'll have audio transcripts of them so that you can go to those dictaphone belts and hear an interview that Putnam did with one of the Pellissiers, and then a transcript of it. And so next year when you come to this symposium, we'll show you some of that project, and there are a couple more batches to come, right?
Yes.
And not all, Putnam is a very interesting and sort of controversial figure, so not all that's on those dictaphone belts is stuff that Harvard wants us to have, or that we want to have, frankly. We want the Roosevelt-related materials, and so there's a lot of curatorial work that occurs before these can be delivered.
Right. And so what I wanted Heather to take a couple minutes talking about, though, is we're actually going to be collaborating on a new project as we're able over the next few months, maybe. And it's going to serve both organizations very well. So would you share, Heather, what
sure.
we're talking about?
First of all, I just want to say you guys are a much less intimidating audience to talk in front of than the high schoolers I spoke in front of this morning. That was a very tough audience.
But stay close. Yeah.
That was a tough audience. They're blank faces. Anyway, I'm so happy to be here. This is my first time in North Dakota, and it's just great to be here representing Harvard. So in my opinion, of course, the best, most exciting way to get close to TR is to be handling those materials, is to be handling the letters and the books that he read, and all of these items. But I realize that not everybody can come to Boston to do that. So it's so great that Dickinson here has been helping us to digitize our collection and to make these materials more widely available, which is really fantastic. So this new project that Sharon alluded to, which is going to be very helpful to us as well as them, I'm sure, is to put together a resource on the Dickinson website on quotations of Theodore Roosevelt. I get questions all the time, people asking me, I want to find the original source of this quotation, where did it come from? And so I look and look and look, and most of the time I can't find it. There's so many quotes out there that somebody came up with or misinterpreted or something in the middle of the 20th century that are attributed to Roosevelt and aren't really him. So we have put together, the librarians at Harvard over the years have put together these great big files on what quotes they've traced and what ones are not his at all. So we're going to hopefully put those together on the Dickinson website. So finally I can just point people to the website instead of going through that file every time myself. So that's going to be really exciting.
And we sort of got the idea for this from Monticello, which has, we have very close friends at the Monticello Library and the Monticello website, including Jack Robertson, who's on our advisory board, and they have if you think a lot of quotations are attributed to Jefferson, or to Roosevelt, look at Jefferson. And so lots of, they call them spurious quotations, and they'll say, did Jefferson say this? For example, that government is best which governs least. And they're going, no. It first appeared in 1922 in such and such a volume, tracing it to its source where possible, but certainly saying these are authentic so far as we know, these are inauthentic so far as we know, and then asking people as they make discoveries to, of course, help correct that. So we want to do that, and it helps you. And so our philosophy in all of this is that everybody has to win. I mean, Harvard does this for Harvard as much as it does it for us, is that we help digitize things that people want. We help correct some of the captions on the Hagedorn still photographs, because when we discovered the film actually provides information about the people in some of those still photographs that wasn't known to Wallace Daly because he didn't have access to the film. So everybody is feeding everybody else. That's the genius of the digital age, that we're doing something that really matters to us. It also matters to the larger Roosevelt community. It matters to the institutions that we're working with. And so our philosophy is always that everybody has to win. There's nothing that no one ever takes something from anybody else. So tell us a little bit about the Emily Dickinson thing, because it's so exciting.
Well, this just launched a few weeks ago. We're very excited about it. Just as Dickinson is pulling together these different collections of Theodore Roosevelt, we at Harvard pulled together different collections of Emily Dickinson's manuscripts. Harvard has about half of them. Amherst College, Emily Dickinson is from Amherst, Massachusetts, in the western part of the state, and other bits and pieces from other libraries, such as the Boston Public Library, Yale, New York Public Library. So they're all together in one place digitally, which is really exciting. Because of strange copyright rules to do with Dickinson, nothing was available publicly before now. But because Harvard owns the copyright, we could say, okay, we'll just do away with a lot of those rules now and make it all available. So now you can see all of Dickinson's manuscripts in one place, edickinson.org. So that's very exciting.
And so that's one of the great things that's happening in the digital revolution. You're able not only to do this, but to knit together things that have been scattered at different places. And so in the old days, you'd have to go to Amherst and to the New York Public Library and other places, including Harvard, to study Dickinson's manuscripts. But now they're being gathered into one electronic space, even though they don't physically have to leave any of their home libraries. And so think of what that's going to mean for scholarship, that for the first time, let's say it's a young assistant professor at the University of Nevada with a family, and she or he doesn't have time to go to 17 different places to do a book on Dickinson. Now those materials are being brought together, and even though you're saying it's fun to touch the sacred object, it's an expensive hobby.
Yes.
And not one that any person can just walk through the doors and do either. These are often fragile documents.
Yes. Well, I should probably say that just because everything is digitized doesn't mean we're going to lock it all away and not let anyone see it. If you come visit me at Harvard, I will certainly take out whatever you want to see, and anyone can come in. It's not just limited to Harvard people or to professors or anything. We are open to the public, so anyone can come and see Theodore Roosevelt material or anything else that you're interested in. So we'll let you touch it.
So Sharon, we started with the handwriting, the things in Roosevelt's hand, and we have the dictaphone belts. Where is this headed with the Harvard connection?
You know, Harvard has a large collection of photographs, and many of those have been digitized, as I understand, Heather, through a private donor funding the project. It's our hope that that donor will allow Harvard to share those with us. They've already been digitized for their purposes, but if we could bring them into our digital library, that allows us to, again, create this multimedia experience for a scholar, not just looking at the documents, but seeing the photographs and listening to the audio and seeing the sheet music, so you get a wider perspective of any particular historical topic on Roosevelt. So we're hoping to get the photographs. I think we've set 3 or 4 other priorities, and that's really
we want the Hagedorn notes, and we want the Putnam notes, and we want everything.
Yes, we want everything. Oh, and a question came up earlier about how closely whether Roosevelt had an editor. And Heather, you might have had the same response at the time. I didn't jump into that conversation then, but one of the things that is among Harvard's materials in TR's hand, literally his handwriting, is manuscripts of articles and some book chapters from, for instance, the Rough Riders. So you can actually pull up the manuscript on our website in his hand and then set the book
Compare it to the book.
Or go to Google Books and get those side by side. And you can see how closely, how much editing was done before the publication. What we don't know is in the handwritten copy that we have in the archive, if he had sent that in a draft form to someone else for review before the copy that we have. But it's a fascinating thing to be able to see, again, his handwritten copy and then the published copy side by side.
So we want all of that, of course, but then the only time we've had been sent away without any success was at Boston University. They have a large collection of Roosevelt manuscripts. And we want that, of course, because that allows us to compare what he wrote to what was published and so on, and variorum editions and a lot of very interesting things. And we went to do our usual abject begging. And Sharon and I, we put on the best show we possibly could, and they listened and said, go away, Dickinson State. So we'll get them too before this is over. The revolution, the digital revolution is going to consume them. In other words, time's on our side on a project of that sort. But Heather, I just want to go back to you as we close. 5 years ago, you probably never thought that you would have to become a Roosevelt scholar, and you're filling some pretty large shoes in Wallace Daly. Wallace Daly was there for a long time, and he knew where everything was, and he walked a whole range of scholars and others through their research on Roosevelt, and suddenly now you're taking on this immense responsibility. But talk a little bit about Doris Kearns Goodwin's project, because that book has just been published, her big volume, Bully Pulpit, and you played a role in the illustrations of that book. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, Doris has been working on the book for quite some time, so certainly the main part of her research was done when Wallace was there, I think probably 6 years ago or so. But they approached me about a year ago when I was still figuring things out and learning who Theodore Roosevelt was. And sort of thinking about what they wanted to do and what exactly she wanted to communicate in her book. So we were looking at political cartoons, and went through, we have a huge collection of political cartoons from the major publications, smaller publications that the family were collecting and other friends of the family from Roosevelt's earliest part of his career onward. So we picked out a bunch of those, and they're sort of frontispieces to every chapter in the book, which I actually haven't gotten my hands on yet to see how this turned out, but it sounds like they turned out very well. So you have a little political cartoon illustrating the chapter, and there's a lot of fun bull moose stuff in there, and it's pretty cool.
So that's where we are, and we want those cartoons too, of course.
That'd be great.
So every time we say this, we want X, it's $26,000 or $32,000. This is still really an expensive idea of digitizing culture, and it's coming down somewhat, but we want to keep up with the highest resolution and the highest national standards on this. And so even if we weren't wanting to build a freestanding Roosevelt Center, we probably need over $500,000 a year certainly for operating this, and if we had double or triple that, it would just hasten our collection of all this. You know, Roosevelt's main body of materials are at Harvard and the Library of Congress, but the national park sites, especially Sagamore Hill and the birthplace, have what for any other person would be a mother lode of materials. And then there are the Denver Public Library and the Huntington Library and the Newberry Library and Yale and on and on and on. And we won't be satisfied until we've done due diligence and gone everywhere that anything is and figured out how to get it digitized. So we're talking about a 30-year project here. And meanwhile, we have to process what we have, and there's a mountain that your staff is just fighting to interpret and get up as fast as possible with the help of our volunteers. So our needs are infinite, but we've already done work that is making a difference in the Roosevelt world, which is fabulous. So Sharon, I think you're going to tell us what we do next.
Yes. So that concludes our presentation. Let's thank Heather for joining us and coming to the stage.